For more than 50 years, Gibb has existed in a rare space within popular music. Known worldwide as the creative force behind the Bee Gees, he helped shape the sound of several generations. Yet beyond the chart-topping songs and the unmistakable falsetto voice lies another story that has fascinated observers for decades. While the music industry is famous for turbulent careers, broken relationships, and public meltdowns, Barry's life followed a strangely different pattern. His career endured. His marriage endured. Even as tragedies surrounded him and his brothers faced personal struggles that ultimately ended in loss, Barry remained steady. To some people, that stability seemed admirable. To others, it seemed mysterious. In celebrity culture, where chaos often becomes part of the narrative, long-term consistency can appear almost suspicious. Over the years, rumors circulated, speculation grew, and questions quietly followed him. How did one man survive the pressures that overwhelmed so many others? What held his life together when so much around him fell apart? Recently, Barry spoke openly about the reality behind those decades. Not to correct gossip or reshape his image, but to explain the choices and relationships that shaped his survival. Long before the world knew his name, Barry Gibb was simply a child surrounded by music. He was born on September 1, 1946, in Douglas on the Isle of Man, a quiet place far removed from the global stages he would later dominate. His father, Hugh Gibb, worked as a band leader and drummer, spending many nights performing in local venues to support the family. Music in their household wasn't treated as a glamorous dream. It was work, routine, and livelihood. Barry's mother, Barbara Gibb, provided balance. She kept the home structured and practical, ensuring that everyday life remained grounded despite the musical environment surrounding them. In many ways, Barry's early years were shaped by observing this dynamic between discipline and creativity. When the family later moved to Manchester during the 1950s, the young Barry began showing signs that music meant something deeper to him than it did to most children. While others played games or followed typical childhood interests, Barry listened closely to melodies and harmonies. He absorbed musical patterns almost instinctively. It wasn't ambition that drove him at first, it was curiosity and fascination with sound itself. Barry's connection to music quickly extended to his younger brothers, Robin and Morris. Together, the three boys spent countless hours singing, experimenting with harmonies, and imitating the performers they heard on the radio or saw their father work with. Their early performances were simple and spontaneous. At that time, the idea of becoming famous musicians was distant and abstract. They sang because it felt natural. In many households, siblings might develop shared hobbies or games. For the Gibb brothers, harmony became that shared language. Family members later described how the boys would practice constantly, sometimes turning everyday moments into impromptu rehearsals. Even before formal training or professional guidance entered the picture, the foundation of their musical partnership had already formed. What made their sound unique was the blend of their voices. Each brother brought a different tone and personality, but together the combination created something distinctive. Still, at that stage, the brothers were simply children exploring a talent they barely understood themselves. The path toward global fame had not yet appeared. What they had instead was instinct, curiosity, and a growing sense that music connected them in ways few other experiences could. The turning point that revealed their potential arrived almost by accident. During the late 1950s, the brothers were scheduled to perform at a small local cinema event, a common opportunity for young entertainers at the time. Like many acts of that era, they planned to lip-sync to a record while appearing on stage. But just before the performance began, something unexpected happened. The fragile record they intended to use broke. With no replacement available and an audience already waiting, the boys faced an uncomfortable choice. They could cancel the act or attempt to sing live without preparation. Choosing the second option, they stepped onto the stage and began performing with nothing but their voices. What might have been an embarrassing moment instead became a revelation. The audience listened closely, surprised to discover that the young performers weren't relying on a recording at all. When the song ended, the applause was enthusiastic and genuine. For Barry, that moment carried lasting meaning. For the first time, he realized that what felt natural to him could also move other people emotionally. It transformed music from a pastime into a possible purpose. Not long after this early experience, the Gibb family made another significant move, this time relocating to Australia. The change of environment opened new opportunities for the brothers, and Bari began approaching music with far greater discipline. What had once been playful experimentation gradually became focused practice. The brothers performed regularly, participated in local television appearances, and developed the professional habits that would eventually support their international careers. Bari, though still very young, increasingly took on leadership within the group. He wrote songs, refined arrangements, and pushed the trio to improve constantly. Those early Australian years were critical because they shaped his work ethic. Success began arriving sooner than anyone expected, bringing attention and responsibility at a young age. Yet even as the brothers started gaining recognition, Bari remained intensely focused on the craft itself. Music was no longer just something he enjoyed. It had become a calling that demanded commitment. The discipline he developed during this period would later help him navigate both the extraordinary success and the devastating losses that defined much of his adult life. By the late 1960s, Bari Gibb's life was moving faster than he had ever imagined. After spending several years building their reputation in Australia, the Bee Gees returned to England determined to establish themselves on a much larger stage. Their music was gaining attention, and the industry quickly recognized the unique songwriting ability that Bari possessed. Yet success at such a young age came with its own pressure. Bari was barely in his 20s, but he was already carrying enormous responsibility, not only for his own career, but for the direction of the band he shared with his brothers. Interviews, performances, and studio sessions began filling nearly every hour of his schedule. Behind the scenes, the expectations from record labels and managers kept growing. At the same time, Bari was still learning how to navigate adulthood while living in the public eye. The Bee Gees were rapidly becoming household names, and the momentum seemed unstoppable. Still, during this intense period of transition, something unexpected happened that would quietly shape the rest of Bari's life. It had nothing to do with a recording studio or a concert stage. Instead, it began with a simple meeting that neither Bari nor the young woman involved could have predicted would last a lifetime. In September 1967, the Bee Gees were invited to appear on the popular British television program Top of the Pops. Their song, Massachusetts, had reached #1, and the group suddenly found themselves at the center of national attention. That same week, the program was being hosted by a young Scottish woman who had recently won the title of Miss Edinburgh. Her name was Linda Gray. At just 17 years old, Linda represented a world very different from the chaotic environment Bari was becoming used to in the music industry. According to Bari's later recollections, he noticed her almost immediately while waiting behind the scenes. It was not a dramatic or cinematic encounter, just a moment of curiosity across a room filled with performers and crew members. But that brief moment led to an introduction and eventually to a simple invitation for tea. Neither of them could have known how significant that meeting would become. Bari later described feeling an unusual sense of calm when talking with Linda, something that contrasted sharply with the whirlwind surrounding his career. At that time, he was still navigating the aftermath of a young and short-lived marriage that had begun before fame arrived. Bari had married his first wife, Maureen Bates, when he was only 19 years old. Like many relationships formed during youth, the marriage struggled to survive the sudden changes brought by fame. As the Bee Gees became increasingly successful, the demands of touring, recording, and public attention made ordinary family life difficult. Eventually, the relationship ended quietly without the dramatic headlines that often follow celebrity breakups. By the time Bari met Linda, he had already experienced how quickly fame could place strain on personal relationships. That experience made him cautious. Rather than rushing into another commitment, Bari and Linda chose to build their relationship slowly. Over the next 3 years, they spent time together away from the public spotlight, learning about each other while Bari's career continued accelerating. Their connection grew not through grand gestures, but through everyday conversations and shared humor. Friends who observed them during those early years often noticed how relaxed Bari seemed in Linda's presence. She did not appear particularly impressed by the fame surrounding him, and that lack of fascination became one of the qualities Bari valued most. 1970, Bari and Linda decided to marry. The ceremony took place in London at Caxton Hall on Bari's 24th birthday. Unlike many celebrity weddings, the event was small and private. There were no elaborate media spectacles or extravagant displays meant to attract public attention. From the very beginning, the couple seemed determined to separate their marriage from the machinery of fame that surrounded Bari's career. This decision would later shape the public's perception of them. As the Bee Gees' popularity exploded throughout the 1970s, Bari became one of the most recognizable figures in music. Yet Linda rarely appeared in interviews or entertainment headlines. She attended important moments when necessary, but otherwise remained largely outside the spotlight. For many observers, this quiet approach was unusual. Celebrity culture often rewards visibility, and spouses of famous musicians frequently become public figures themselves. Linda chose the opposite path. Instead of building a public image, she focused on creating a stable home environment for their growing family. What seemed simple to them, however, eventually became something others questioned. As the Bee Gees entered their most successful era during the mid-1970s, Bari's professional life reached extraordinary heights. The group was producing hit after hit, recording constantly, and touring across the world. Songs that Bari helped write became anthems of an entire generation, especially during the disco era that defined much of the decade. The fame was overwhelming at times, but inside Bari's personal life, the rhythm remained surprisingly ordinary. Bari and Linda built routines centered around family rather than celebrity. They welcomed children, spent time at home whenever Bari's schedule allowed, and tried to maintain a sense of normalcy despite the enormous attention surrounding the Bee Gees. Linda's decision to stay mostly out of the public eye created a clear boundary between Bari's career and his private world. To some fans, that boundary appeared admirable. To others, it seemed unusual enough to spark curiosity. Questions occasionally surfaced about how a marriage could remain so steady while the music industry around it was known for instability. Yet Bari rarely responded to such speculation. Instead, he focused on his work and returned home to the same quiet family life that had begun years earlier with that simple meeting behind a television studio stage. If you want, I can now continue with paragraphs 11-15, which will cover the Bee Gees, peak fame and pressures, Andy Gibb's struggles, Morris and Robin's battles, Bari watching his brothers collapse while his own life stayed stable,